Hello and welcome to another episode of that Football Data Guide podcast. Gameweek 1 of the World Cup is done and dusted, and there's barely been time to breathe before Group A and Group B are off again. But I'm going to take a quick pause and look at the key highlights and standouts from the first set of fixtures. So those of you that haven't been able to stay up until 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. or some of the ridiculous times that we've had can catch up on some of the key things of note. Now, the first thing that I've noticed is the return of the 4-4-2. Mike Bassett would be proud. 12 nations have opted to operate with that formation, with it being the second most used formation behind the 4-2-3-1, which is probably the most common formation across world football at the moment. Those teams are Senegal, Canada, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Paraguay, Haiti, Scotland, Ivory Coast, Ecuador, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Iraq, and Norway. Now, those 4-4-2s have been hit and miss. Scotland, Haiti was an interesting one because both teams very much matched up in that formation. Paraguay have to be the worst team I've seen operate with a 4-4-2. They left way too much line between their midfield and their defence, and they were so easy to play through. Now, this is an interesting departure from modern-day club football where the classic 4-4-2 is considered a bit archaic. But there's some reasons why it could be in fashion during this World Cup. It's very easy to coach. A lot of defensive blocks are set up in the 4-4-2 formation anyway, where you've got two strikers, one curving their run, the other one blocking the pass, and then your two banks of four. It's a very, very common pressing method. And in a lot of those cases that I've just mentioned, it gets the best out of the country's individual talent. With Norway, you've got two impressive strikers in Haaland and Sorloth, and a couple of very good wingers. There's quite a lot of wingers on show at the World Cup at the moment. Ivory Coast are very similar. Yan Diomande, I mentioned in my World Cup Wonder Kids video before the tournament started. He has absolutely ripped teams to shreds already this World Cup, and actually quite a few of my Wonder Kids that I picked there have had good tournaments so far. The other thing is it kind of fits with the defense versus attack that we've seen so far in the tournament. There's been a lot of games where the flow has been a weaker level team against a higher level team, with the weaker team needing to sit back and defend and looking to hit on the counter-attack. So we can see here that this is the playing style map of the teams in the World Cup so far from game week 1. I've lost my face, so I'm just going to put myself up down the corner here. Now, it's split into 4 blocks: your dominant possession and high press, which tends to be the teams that you'd expect. And that has not always worked out for teams. You can see in that top right green section, Portugal, Turkey, Spain, Switzerland. We'll throw Switzerland in there and Uruguay, because all of those teams struggled against more defensive teams. Obviously, the result of the first round was Spain's draw with Cape Verde. Big shock, but also Turkey's loss to Australia was a big shock. Portugal only managed to draw with the Democratic Republic of Congo. Switzerland only managed to draw with Qatar. So a lot of teams playing that dominant possession, high pressing football are really struggling. Then on the other end of the spectrum, in your kind of bottom left quadrant there, you've got those teams that I mentioned. You've got Cape Verde right down the bottom, and then Democratic Republic of Congo are in there, Australia in there, Qatar are in there, Senegal in there against a more dominant France side. South Africa did try and sit back against Mexico, but that was an absolute disaster class. And then there's a few teams that are going direct, but also playing a high press. The most noticeable of those is Canada, who are very much utilising their wings really well. And Bosnia and Herzegovina, I thought, were unlucky in their first group game. They had plenty of chances, but were unable to get the ball over the line. But they've been playing very, very direct football. Then there's a few in the blue section that are the dominant teams, but aren't pressing as aggressively, looking to suck teams in and hit them on the counter-attack or use that to create space. Interestingly, and we'll touch on them later, England are in this section. You can see them up in the top left of that blue section. The ones that kind of stand out in terms of the most passes per sequence is the Netherlands, who I was very, very excited for Netherlands versus Japan in the first game week. Turned out to be one of the most boring games of the tournament. It was absolutely an absolute snooze fest. But what Netherlands were very good at there is keeping the ball, drawing the opposition onto them in Japan, and then taking advantage of the spaces that left. Argentina was the Messi show. Not much more to say about that. Now, when we look at the top 9 players by final third entries, you can see 2 of those games that I've mentioned, the Spain draw and the Turkey defeat, contains all 9 players who are currently top for final third entries. So at the moment in this World Cup, getting into the final third and playing a lot of passes and doing a lot of carries in the final third is not a positive thing for teams. High possession teams are really struggling with low blocks and breaking down teams. Pedri created a bunch of threat with his passes. Rodri, very similar. Kadioglu is in there. Arda Güler, Laporte, Çalhanoğlu, all of those players. And they're not playing little short passes here. They're trying to progress the ball into dangerous areas in the final third. You can see that there's lots of link up between Kadioglu and Yildiz. Then the left-hand side, then Çalhanoğlu is trying to kind of move the ball across, and Arda Güler is operating across that line for Spain. Both Pedri and Rodri are trying to shift it, and even Pau Gabassi from defence is getting involved there and trying to get the ball out wide. But that's very easy to defend against as a compact block. So Spain had the most passes in the first game of the World Cup with 764 successful passes, then Portugal 750, Turkey 664. Interestingly, Algeria are next with 585 in their game against Argentina there. And then it's not like those teams weren't creating shots either. When you look at the first game week ranked by the total number of shots, you have Turkey with 30 shots, Spain with 27, Uruguay with 27, and then Germany will come on to them. They sit 4th in terms of shots. But those top 3 teams, particularly Spain and Turkey, they're the ones on this map. So they're doing all the right things. They're getting a lot of passes. They're having a lot of shots. You'd think they should be winning these games comfortably. Now, why has that not been the case? I'm going to use the Germany example because Germany, very similar. They're up there in terms of successful passes. They're up there, as we've just heard, in terms of shots. But what is the difference between the German strategy to the strategy of the other teams that we've seen? Now, it all boils down to width. There's a concept invented by the Red Bull coaching team or people who have coached the Red Bull family of clubs. And that's a concept of minimum width. Now, the simplest explanation of minimum width is it's getting your players as close together as possible into the most dangerous areas of the pitch. When we talk about expected threat and expected goals, those most dangerous areas are kind of around the goal mouth and in the middle of the pitch. A lot of teams at the World Cup have liked to utilize kind of wide, pacey wingers in the counter-attacking fashion, and there's a bunch of them in the World Cup. We'll talk about successful individuals later on. Germany don't have that. You can see from Germany's passing network that they are operating with this concept of minimum width, both on the ball and off the ball, which essentially means compacting the play as much as possible. In the average pass map that you've got here, you can see that they're all very tightly coupled together. The 2 centre halves are fairly high up. Then you've got your midfield pivot basically there, and then 2 inverted fullbacks, both Joshua Kimmich and Anthony Brown, I want to say, are very capable of either drifting into midfield. Kimmich is more of the one that will drift into deeper midfield. Brown is the one that is there, who is very good at underlapping runs. And he will have netted people a bunch of fantasy football points by getting goals and assists by doing exactly that, by underlapping. But what it allows and allowed Germany to do is get their best players on the ball in key positions, rotate their front players so that Curacao didn't know who to pick up, and enable those passing lines into the dangerous areas of threat. And then obviously when they got the ball into those areas, they were effective at getting their shots on target and finishing them off. So their shot on target percentage was 42% of shots on target from their 26 shots. Now you compare that to the other teams we mentioned, Spain and Turkey, 26.67 and 25.93. That's the difference. Get the ball into dangerous areas, get your shots on target, and you'll score goals. Obviously, Germany scored 7. With Spain, you can see they are kind of compact, but they're wide. You've got very much 2 players in both wide areas, which means that you have very strong pass lines between the centre halves and into midfield and to the wide players, but not much else going on elsewhere. And that is why they really struggled to break the teams down. If we look at the pass end zones, you can see this concept of minimum width. Again, in terms of Germany's play, this is where the passes ended up. And you can see the big chunk of black in the middle is in those inside areas. So you've got 7% in kind of the main middle part of the pitch, and then 6% in the half space areas outside the box, with 4% in the middle and then only 2% in the box, but not as high the percentage in the wide areas. Where you compare that to Spain, their top numbers are 11% out on that wide right-hand channel. Now, a little bit of a plug for my Substack, which is also that football data guy, but I've essentially got a bunch of analysis for every game of the tournament on there, and all of these visuals. Now, when I was looking through that, Spain put in about 24, maybe 26 crosses into the box. Now, they don't have a physical number 9 that can get on the end of the crosses. So for them, getting the ball into that area where they've got 11% is no good. Now, the thing with Spain you've got to remember is they didn't have Lamine Yamal, and they didn't have Inaki or Nico Williams. One of the Williams brothers. One plays for Spain, the other one plays for someone else. But one of the Williams brothers on the other side. So they ended up playing Pedri on one of the wings. Now he's more of a natural midfielder, and you saw from the touches in the final third and the carries in the final third that he got on the ball a lot, but he's not going to take on defenders. So they were caught between kind of a couple of strategies, which is why they struggled. But yeah, by getting the ball through the middle is also why Germany was so good. If we look at the progressive passes, again, you can see Germany have 48% going through the middle. My big fat noggin is in the way of the bottom bit. So if we just take me out here, you can see that Spain have 40% going down the right-hand side. So again, targeting those progressive passes through the middle of the pitch and into the dangerous areas of threat. And that resulted in good quality chances. So when we look at the chance map, obviously Germany scored 7 goals, but you can see that they scored 7 goals from 3.92 XG and had 26 shots, 20 of them on target. Lovely stuff. Spain had 27 shots, similar sort of number. They had 15 on target, which isn't the worst. It is a lower percentage than Germany, but still not awful. And they generated 1.71 XG from that. But what you can see when you compare the location of those shots is you've got a number of shots from outside the box. And Spain were getting frustrated with that. And Laporte lashed one wide. They did also have a huge chance where Ferran Torres hit the woodwork. That's the kind of hatched dot there, the biggest hatched dot. And that was the difference between the two sides, and why I think Germany have a better squad and are better equipped to go further in the tournament. The other team that has similarities to Germany in terms of getting those volumes of high quality shots and shots in dangerous areas is, interestingly, England. So if I pull up this shot volume versus shot quality map, so on your x-axis you've got the total number of shots in the games, and then your shot quality is xg per shot. So remember what we just talked about in terms of minimum width. It's about getting the ball into those areas close to the goal where you can generate the most expected threat and the most expected goals. And expected goals is essentially when you're shooting from good positions. The better a position you shoot from, the more likely you are to score a goal. And there's a big gap here. You've got 6 teams on that right-hand side with what you'd classify as a outstanding volume of shots. Turkey, Spain, Uruguay. We've mentioned them. Toothless in attack. Switzerland are another one. Briefly touched upon Qatar, but similar sort of thing. At the start of the tournament, before Spain and Turkey had played, pretty much all of these top final third entry players in that chart were Switzerland players. Then above those, but Switzerland were a little bit unlucky, really, because you can see they were generating higher quality chances of shots. Above those, Germany, we've talked about how they created good chances for their shots. But then you've also got England in there. Not quite the same volume of shots, but still a decent volume, but creating very good quality shot chances. Just want to talk about Norway quickly as well. When you've got Erling Haaland, you're going to get very good shot quality there. I don't think they had many shots. The fact that Erling Haaland charged down the goalkeeper like a bull, seeing a red flag waved in his face, is potentially why they are up there. And I'd expect them to regress to the mean a little bit because they had very, very high XG chances from mistakes given away rather than their own play. So got to take that into account a little bit. But going back to England, they have similar sort of players to Germany in the fullback positions. You've got Reece James, who, like Kimmich, is comfortable coming into that central midfield area and rotating in there. You've got Nico O'Reilly, who is very good at dropping into the front line rather than the midfield area. He didn't do that much against Croatia. He was more swapping with Declan Rice, which I'm not overly keen on. I think that cost us the first goal in particular, and that was something that changed in the second half. You saw O'Reilly hold his position a lot more and Rice be much more advanced, with Elliot Anderson being the sitter. So they've got those fullbacks that can operate that way against any teams that really will come and sit back and defend in a low block. And they've got players comfortable on the ball in the middle of the pitch. So they kind of operate with that minimum width. But then you've also got high and wide wingers as well in Madueke and Gordon and Saka, who like more Madueke, to be honest. He was our main threat down the wing and created a bunch of threat by getting down there and looking for pullbacks, which is, if you can't pass through teams, that's another option to have. So Tuchel's kind of balancing it between, if they really are sitting deep, then you've got the players at fullback position and in the midfield who can drop in and play those passes around and do those rotations like Germany did and play through the lines. But you can also try and catch teams in transitions, and particularly artificial transitions. So a transition is when a team's attacking usually and you win the ball back, and then the transition is you then end up on the attack. An artificial transition is by using your own possession to essentially draw the defense onto you to create a setup and a structure as if the opposition had lost the ball in the middle of the pitch. Essentially, is getting them to overpress by baiting the press. And I've got a visual up here, a lovely little Mecco chart, this is called, and it essentially shows your percentage of touches per player. Now, It's quite interesting because your top three touches, Ezri Konsa at right centre-back, John Stones at left centre-back, Jordan Pickford in goal with close to 12% of England's touches that game. And that was because England were keeping the ball very deep and looking to draw Croatia onto them so that they could then play the triangles around and beat the press that way. And it was effective because, number one, it got Madueke in down the right and it created those high volume XG chances, which you can see here. So I think of all the teams that I've watched in the opening game week, England and Germany look to be the most tactically astute and have a good tactical plan for all of the different types of teams that they may face in the tournament. I think they've got a very good squad structure in terms of how they've built their squad, whereas the other teams that we've mentioned, the Spains and the Turkeys, both of them have insanely quality players, but maybe not necessarily the versatility and the adaptability to play against all of the different kinds of styles. That's it for kind of the team tactics bit. The only other thing that I wanted to focus on in this roundup is some individuals. I wanted to have a quick look at the goal scorers of the tournament so far. So this shows the goals compared to their expected goals, that diagonal line. Anyone in the mauve, the light purple, is outperforming their expected goals. Anyone in the dark purple is underperforming their expected goals. Eliawahi for Ivory Coast is the biggest XG underperformer for those that haven't scored any goals so far. I thought Ivory Coast created a bunch of attacking chances with that man, Yan Diomande, again, who honestly, he is the one. If I was to pick one superstar to watch this tournament who's going to come and rip up the Premier League, it would be him. Whoever manages to sign him, he's going to be the next Mo Salah. I'm throwing that out there right now. You can bookmark this if it doesn't happen. If he ends up playing for Brighton or someone in 6 years, come back to this and leave a comment. But Ivory Coast just don't have that striker at the moment who can finish chances off. Mbolo has scored a goal, but also missed a bunch of chances for Switzerland. Had some very good ones. Interestingly, Erling Haaland, who did score 2 goals, still does have slightly more XG than goals scored than the man that is Lionel Messi, way out there, 3 goals, absolutely outstanding hat-trick. But also, who'd have thought Yassin Ayari with 2 absolute screamers would be that far on the chart as well? I remember him having two loan spells in the Championship in quick succession a few seasons ago and not really impressing in either of those. So his career has come on leaps and bounds since then. You've got Havertz in there. We all know about Havertz. Elijah Just, who very much was the recipient of Chris Wood's unbelievable hold-up play. If you want to watch an example of incredible number 9 hold-up play, just completely unfazed by the ball being pumped up to him, chesting it down, flicking it around the corners. Chris Wood is definitely up there with one of the best individual performances at this World Cup that I've seen. Following Balogun for the US, great at stretching the defence, and that kind of worked into their plan. And then obviously Harry Kane, a couple of set-piece goals, retaken penalty. We'll see where he ends up. And Kylian Mbappe. Just want to jump to the expected threat, because this is an interesting one. We've spent a lot of this podcast talking about dangerous areas and getting the ball into dangerous areas and how different teams have done that. Having players that are double threat players are incredibly, incredibly useful and incredibly rare. So your red lines on this are your 0 threat generators. Anything to the left of those red lines means you're generating negative threat. Anything to the right means you're generating positive threat. Interestingly, you've got a bunch of negative threat. Now, I don't love threat in charts like this, particularly over one game, because it can generate bad impressions, particularly for strikers or anyone playing with back to goal, because if you're laying off a pass backwards, then by the whole method of calculating threat, that's going to generate negative threat. So it's a bit harsh. But what it does do is it does tell you the players that are passing forward who is very good. So you can disregard the kind of left-hand side. Top right is where we want to be looking. I know I've banged on about him for a while now. Yan Diomande is in there. You can see him on the right-hand side. Plenty of carry threat, a little bit of passing threat as well. Superb. Joshua Kimmich is that double threat player that Germany have. If he gets injured, might struggle a bit. Now, Ferdi Kadioglu is in there. Now, I would like to see him operate a bit more centrally, like Kimmich does, because if we just go back and look at his final third entries, he's generated a bunch of good passes and good carries there, but all down the left wing. If he could get that a bit more centrally and start playing through the lines and just give a bit more variation, then Turkey can still be a really good side despite their initial defeat to Australia. So I'm looking forward to looking at them. Noni Madueke generated a bunch of stuff from his carries down the right and his cutbacks. There was a couple of excellent cutbacks into the box. And then the player that I think can make a real difference at this tournament, France are obviously going to go all the way. Michael Olise is an elite player, and it was an interesting tactical shift in the France game by changing his position to being more central rather than being on the right-hand side. Take the defensive burden off of him, give it to other players in the French side, let him play some of his passes and some of those through balls to Mbappe and Dembele and all of the other rapid players that you've got in the France team. They're game-changing. That was the key factor to France going on and winning that game, his change in position. Again, I'm going to plug the Substack. There's a bunch of visuals on that, including a formation shift one, which shows you how much Olise's position changed from the first half to the second half. And then, as you'd expect, a bunch of Spain players and Yuri Tielemans as well up there in terms of the pass threat. Andy Robertson rolling back the years for Scotland against Haiti there on the left-hand side, played a number of good balls there. But they're kind of the top players of the tournament so far for different sides. Now, hopefully that has given you a bit of an overview of how to break down these stubborn defences that we're seeing at the World Cup, to break down the 4-4-2s, to break down the minnows. And there was an example last night of how to do that. Qatar couldn't sit back and defend for their lives and got absolutely picked apart by Canada. I'll be trying to do one of these at the end of every game week. The next one I'll likely be out in the States. I'm off to the England-Ghana game, so expect some stuff from that as well. If you enjoyed this video and you want to hear more, or read more, then the Substack I've plugged a few times. That's That Football Data Guy. I'm on X, TF Data Guy on there. And obviously, subscribe to the channel. Pop this a like. Leave us some stuff in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if I've missed any kind of tactical insights or any kind of players that aren't appearing on the data who should be and who are going to be a success this World Cup.